Gatorade Endurance conducted a survey designed to identify and understand the barriers minority athletes, including people of color, Black, LGBTQ+, and disabled face when considering participation in endurance sports. Safety is a key barrier to entering endurance sports, which was found in the Gatorade Endurance survey. And a surprising statistic was that of those who said safety was a concern. 22% of them expressed hate crimes as the top one. Chris, has safety ever been an issue for you when participating in endurance sports?
Yeah, definitely. Safety has been a concern for me and definitely for members of the LGBTQ plus community. I know personally, as a transgender man, I was concerned, entering into endurance sports about whether or not I'd be accepted, both by my coaches, by teammates, and by fans and spectators at events and races. And while I've been fortunate to have a minimal or small number of instances, there are certainly moments where safety is the top of concern that I have when I'm at races, which definitely takes me out of my competition. To be focusing on, whether or not I'll be physically safe in a space takes away from all of the things that an athlete needs to think about in order to perform at the top of their game.
Kira, it seems like you were listening to Chris's response and you had some thoughts.
I definitely am concerned when I'm out on the street running that, I won't be safe. And I've had to restructure training. As I'm even now training for a distance race, I have to plan my time differently because I don't feel safe running in my neighborhood after a certain time. And I know that this is an experience that impacts others that sit at the intersection of, Black and women. So in order to get around it, I definitely have sought solace in training in groups and, finding people who are willing to ride along with me. But it's something that, to Chris's point, takes away from the other things I need to think about as an athlete.
I know I think about it all the time. I'm a cyclist, and I always make sure that I have that really bright yellow neon tennis ball looking jacket because I don't want anybody to think, who is this random Black dude rolling through my neighborhood? Of course, I'm speeding like at 35 miles an hour on my bike. Chris, you and I should try to compete against each other. But, I find myself in those situations like you, Kira, where I get nervous and I find comfort in groups just the same. Kionte, what about yourself?
I definitely can resonate with feeling safe because, being an African-American man, just going through certain neighborhoods that you aren't typically used to going down, and me being a runner, I do have that feeling of just like, am I safe in this environment? Like, I don't know anyone here. Like, I'm, 3 miles, 4 miles, or however far I am from like people I do know or my comfort zone.
Carolyn, have you been in some of the similar situations where you felt nervous about being out there working out and people around you and not knowing exactly their intent?
Definitely. And especially, in the past year with the pandemic, shutting everything down and creating a lot of very polarized and very intense, I should say, misbeliefs of certain people groups, and also just with the inability of many of us to even process or have an outlet for any of the emotions or frustrations that we have all experienced in the past year of COVID shutting everything down. Definitely for the Asian American community, we saw a significant increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. And for myself, I experienced a lot of anxiety. Should I run in a more crowded space? Because as a female, that ordinarily is safer or gives the idea of safety if something happens. But being an Asian American female, going to more crowded places during COVID and even now, it would put me more at risk of being assaulted, or whether verbally or physically. And those are things that I need to weigh. And especially also as a mother who has been trying to encourage my children to come enjoy and participate in these endurance sports with me, we have had to have a lot of different conversations in equipping my children for, what if XYZ type of situations happen, people approach you or people yell at you or people throw things at you. How do we respond? And what is a safety contingency plan?
What steps do you take to feel safer, while training?
Just on the very basic level, I never wear headphones because I want to always be aware of my surroundings. If anybody is approaching, any car that might be approaching, I always carry my ID.
Chris, well, what other steps have you taken?
What does work for me is I think that it's important for me to do my research prior to taking on a training route or going to a race. For trans people in the United States, there are several states that actually allow discrimination against us. And there are several sporting organizations and leagues that actually don't permit via their policies transgender people to participate in the gender with which they identify. I had an example of going into North Carolina when there was a bathroom bill law in place and trying to compete there when there was hostile territory by the law in that state was really nerve-wracking for me. So doing my research about the policies that are at different races, asking people in my community if they've ever participated in a race or event, or if they've visited a certain town, city, or training location, so that I know in advance kind of what I'm getting myself into.
Being able to share your location so that people know where you are, the ones that love you can keep you safe, making sure you're bright and people can look out for you. I think it's important and to know your information. So I want to say thank you for joining us. Tune into GatoradeEndurance.com/community or on Instagram at Gatorade Endurance to see other barriers that athletes face and tips for how to overcome.